get something, it's always just the most exciting part in the beginning. So I'm super excited for everybody to start their mobile development journey. But let's get right into it. So who am I? Why am I talking to y'all? So my name is Caren. I'm going to be one of the instructors for this course. I'm currently an Android engineer at Google, but I actually also learned Android through CodePath. So back in 2014, CodePath was geared more towards people who had already graduated college and working in the industry. And I took my first Android CodePath class, and a couple years later, I'm working at Google for Android. So it's pretty cool. I'm really excited for y'all to be part of the CodePath family, learn everything you'll need to succeed in the industry, and hopefully this will be your awesome start. So to break it down for today, we're going to take it a bit slow. We're just going to get comfortable with it. I see some people have their camera turned on. If you could also, if you can, and if you feel comfortable with it, that'd be awesome if you could turn your camera on. Otherwise, sometimes it's kind of depressing when I feel like I'm just talking to myself, staring at all these black screens, right? So take a second. If you can turn your camera on, that'd be awesome. Nice. I'm seeing a bunch of people. You guys are already my favorite class. This is the most participation I've gotten. So for today's agenda, we're just going to start off a little bit slow. We're going to talk about, hey, why is it so exciting to build mobile apps? And then we're actually going to try to study what makes good and bad apps so that you can get a better sense of what you should be building when you have your awesome idea. Talk a little bit about our course schedule, some expectations, take a quick break. Everybody needs a quick break to check their phone sometimes. So if we're not taking a quick break, try to pay as much attention as you can during the lesson so that you don't miss anything. But we'll be taking breaks so you could get your little Facebook and Instagram chats in. And then we're going to do a little bit intro to Git. If you already master at Git, feel free to tune me out during that time. And then we're just going to save 15 to 20 minutes at the end to do a Q&A. So you can ask me any kind of questions you have. What is it like working at Google? What is it like getting my first Android job? Any questions you may have. So that's our agenda for today. So let's dive right into it. I'm kind of curious, for everybody who's joined this class so far, why specifically are you excited about mobile? Because, a lot of people have been building web apps. The first thing they build is kind of like a web page or something on the web. Why are you most excited about building mobile apps in particular? Yeah, so every time I'm going to ask questions, you can feel free to type your answers in the chat. So people are saying mobile is the future. Everybody has a mobile app, or everybody has a mobile phone. I'm addicted to my phone. Yeah, so you already have a pretty good idea of why mobile is just gonna get more and more popular and ubiquitous, right? So these are some crazy stats, but estimated 1 out of 3 human beings in the world own a smartphone. So that's including, human beings include like babies who are like 1 year old versus like old people who are like 90. So in the whole world, not even just in America, people in third world countries, 1 out of 3 human beings own a smartphone. So being able to develop an app that reaches that big of an audience, that's really, really powerful, right? Desktop used to be really popular, so people used to always be on the web. But now that we're all getting more mobile and moving around more these days, mobile has actually taken over desktop usage since 2015, which is 6 years ago now. So it's kind of crazy to think that most people, when they're surfing the web or they're buying stuff or they're doing something online, it's usually through their mobile phones. The third really important thing is many companies have become mobile first focused. So previously, a lot of companies were like, hey, we got to build our web app first. We got to get the web experience perfectly down. But now most companies have actually been going towards more of a mobile first focused direction where they're thinking, hey, how do we make the mobile experience the best experience for users? Web has kind of taken a backseat to that. And the fourth most mind-blowing stat for me was the average starting salary for mobile developers is 80K. And this is the average based across all of America. So not just in like, Bay Area. This is like average starting for all developers in America, which is mind-blowing to me because 80K is more than either of my parents ever made. And that's the starting salary. I don't know, is that still a crazy number for you all? Or am I just really old school thinking 80K is a lot of money? Does 80K sound like a crazy amount to anybody else? One person says it is a lot, right? So just putting all this together, I think in my sense, being able to be a good mobile developer really gives you a great edge going into your first job. You're able to build something that reaches a really broad audience. You're able to build something that a lot of people are going to be using a lot of most of their time with, and you're going to be earning some pretty nice income for that. So the goal for the course, we have, I think, 4 main goals. One is, of course, we're going to try to learn how to build iOS and Android apps. It might seem really intimidating, right? When I was in college, I was going through all these data structure courses, learning strings and arrays and linked lists, but I felt like I never really was able to put those skills to application, right? What do I actually need to know linked lists for? What do I actually need to know strings and arrays for, right? And it's surprisingly easy to get started building iOS and Android apps. And hopefully you all find that to be the case as well in this class. So our first goal really is just to learn and start building these mobile apps. The second one is to gain a better understanding of the tech industry. So personally for me, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any family in the tech industry. So it's all kind of this big blocks of, hey, what do people actually do in the tech industry? Like, how do you actually get a job in the tech industry? What happens when you're actually in the tech industry? So we're going to be bringing in people from different panels to kind of talk to you about their journey into the tech industry. 3, we're really hoping you could connect with other students. So we're going to have some breakout sessions. You're going to be able to meet other people, hopefully be able to build some cool mobile apps together. And really, this class is called Intro to Mobile Product Development, right? So hopefully by the end of this course, you feel super prepared to build your next billion-dollar app idea. What are some billion-dollar app ideas people have right now? Shout out. I'm really curious to see what kind of ideas people have. If you had to pitch me an idea for your app right now, what kind of ideas do you have? That's a good one, not telling. The most common ones are usually travel, something to do with travel, something to do with reading reviews about food places, some type of game, also very, very common. Ooh, encrypted chat would be a really cool app that I think a lot of people would be interested in. Love it. Just throw out all these ideas. Our best work comes when we're collaborating with each other, right? So the more ideas and the more people we could get to work on something, the better. So hopefully by the end of this course, going through the coding labs, listening to the industry experts on the panels, being in breakout rooms with other students, by the end, you're going to feel super prepared to actually build out these next billion-dollar app ideas. So I'm kind of curious. These are our goals for you for the course, right? When we built out this course, these were kind of our goals for you. We want you to be able to learn how to build Android and iOS apps. We want you to feel more comfortable about the tech industry. We want you to be able to connect with other students. But a great thing I like to do is set personal goals for myself, right? So I'm curious to hear what your all personal goals for the next 8 weeks could be. It could just be, hey, I want to just get through these 8 weeks. I want to do all the coding labs. Or it could be, hey, I want to meet at least 5 people to help me build out my next app idea. Or it could be, hey, I want to be able to build out all the coding labs and then add extra touches to them. So what are your personal goals for the next 8 weeks? So a lot of people are saying, hey, I want to get really good at Android development. I want to be able to network. I want to meet at least 5 people, improve coding skills, build out that first project. Maybe your goal can be, hey, I actually want to put an app into the Play Store or the iOS store after this course ends, which is totally doable. I want to make friends, gain more experience. I love it. I love all these. So the thing about making goals is sometimes we forget about them after like a couple of weeks, right? So if you can, write down your goal right now so that if you ever feel like throughout this course when things are getting a little hard, because I promise you, once you start doing the coding labs, things are going to start seeming a little more difficult. Just look back at what you wrote at this very moment so you can inspire yourself to keep going, pushing through. Thing about goals is it helps us get through these challenging goals, right? But we also don't want to forget about them. So make sure now that you have thought about your goal that you write down, you remember it every time you come to class. So if you're feeling like lazy on a Saturday, like, oh, I don't really want to go to class on Saturday again, just think about this goal that you made right now. All right, so now that we have all these goals, before we can start even thinking about before we can even start thinking about building out our own next awesome idea, we have to kind of study what's already out there, right? We kind of have to understand the mobile apps that are already out there and think about what makes them good and bad so that when we make our own apps, we can make the best app possible. So I'm kind of curious. So based on your experiences, everybody uses apps all the time, right? We're always on our phones. What do you think are the qualities that makes a good app? So if you're using an app and you really love it, what are some things that actually make it good? Good UI, that's a huge one. Simplicity, it has to be simple to use, right? If it's really complicated, you don't really know how to get something done, it makes things really hard. It has to be useful. No ads, smooth. It has to be a smooth experience. I like that. It has to have good color palette, it has to have good design, it has to be visually pleasing. I don't want to use something that looks ugly for a long time, right? It has to be addictive. I have to be able to feel like I need to use it for some whatever weird reason. Power efficient, shareable, has to be updated constantly. Technology is moving fast. Solves an issue. I love all of these. So I don't think I came up with quite as many as you all did. But I think the two main things that, in my opinion, that makes an app great is one, is it easy to use? Like if I'm trying to do something, do I have to think about it or can I just do it without even really realizing I'm doing something? So is it easy to use? I think that's a big one. Two, for me at least, is it fun to use? Like, am I getting joy out of every time I'm using it? Or do I feel miserable every time I'm using it, right? If I feel miserable using something, I'm probably not going to want to come back and use it again. So those are my ideas, but you guys all had way better ideas for that. Okay, now on the flip side, what makes a bad app? So what are the qualities of apps that makes you never want to use it again? Or qualities of apps where you download it, you try it, and then you're like, I gotta delete this app. This is no good. I'm seeing so many answers for this. I love this. Mostly, I think I'm seeing bad UI, hard to use, buggy, ads, battery draining. Yeah, that's a big one. If an app drains my battery, it's out in a second. Not good to look at. Ask for too much information. That's a good one. Doesn't do what I expect. Yeah, that's a good one too. Privacy, storage, all very good answers. Scams. So as you're thinking about building out your own apps in the future, take a quick peek at everything else that everybody has said, because these are things you don't want your app to be doing, right? You don't want your app to be buggy. You don't want your app to be scammy. You don't want your app to be hard to use. So as you're building out your app and designing your own app throughout these next 8 weeks, you want to kind of think about, hey, this is the stuff that my app should do. These are things that make people want to use apps. And these are the things that my app shouldn't do. These are what's going to make me lose users for my apps. Again, I don't think I came up with nearly as many as you all did. But my main things were, one, is the app hard to use and difficult to understand? If it is, I'm probably not going to be using it a lot. Two, if it's buggy and crashes a lot, it's going to be really frustrating to use, right? And if it's a frustrating experience for me, I'm not going to come back to using this app. But I love all your answers way more than mine. All right, so now that we've done some thinking by ourselves, it's way more fun if we all get together and talk to some other people about this, right? Nobody wants to hear me talk for 2 hours. So we're gonna try our first breakout sessions too. So this is kind of just a warm up. So if you feel a little chaotic, that's totally fine. But the thing about breakout rooms that I want to remind everybody is every time we go into a breakout room and every time we say, hey, everybody go into breakout rooms, the instructors are always on the course portal. So who can people tell me what I mean when I say the course portal? So where would you go for the course portal right now? Type the link in the chat. Where's the course portal? Do people know what I'm talking about? Right, so courses.codepath.com is what we're going to refer to as the course portal. And every time we do a breakout session, you're going to have to want that page open. So bookmark that page right now. Every time we do something, all the instructions are going to be there. So in our first breakout session, so soon we're going to go into these little rooms and you're going to be with like 3 to 4 other students in a room. We're going to spend about 20 minutes in the room. First, you want to spend 5 minutes to introduce yourselves. Talk about, say your name, where you're from. I'm from San Francisco, your favorite TV show, music, artist, or book. So everybody goes around introducing themselves. You can start with the person whose birthday is coming up next. So whoever's birthday is coming up the soonest, you could go first, and then so on. And then for the next 15 minutes, each person is going to get 3 minutes to talk about their favorite and least favorite app and the reasons why they like and dislike them. And this is good user research, right? As we learn about, hey, how do we build apps that other users will like more? So 15 minutes for that. If your group ends up having extra time, every person can go around and pitch their awesome app idea. So get some feedback on what other people think about your awesome app idea. And then we'll all come back to this main room after 20 minutes. Does that all make sense? Any questions about this? Okay, so what is the first thing you're going to do when you go into your breakout rooms? Yeah, you gotta find out everybody's B days so you can start introducing yourselves, right? And I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen for a little bit so I could show you all the course portal that I have up so we all know exactly what we're doing. All right, 1 second as I share my Google Chrome tab. So this is the course portal I'm talking about. And every time we go into these breakout rooms, what you want to do is go to the lab section. So we're in week 1 right now. We're in the intro to mobile class. The lab section is always going to have all the instructions you need. So everything I talked about, it's all on this page here. So if you're like, hey, what do we do when we get into our rooms? It's always going to be in the course portal on the lab section. All right. So if there are no more questions, I think we're ready for breakout rooms. It's going to take a sec for breakout rooms to open. So you should see a join button now. And if you click that, you're going to go into rooms. You're going to start meeting people. It's going to be awesome. So if you're still in this room right now, this is a great sign to us that you have not been paying attention. And we might mark you as absent if you don't join your breakout room soon. If you don't know how to join breakout rooms, feel free to unmute yourself and then we can help you out. How was that breakout room experience? Good, bad, okay. I would do it again. I wouldn't do it again. Too long, okay. Some people thought they wanted more time. Some people met cool people. Okay. Usually when people have bad feedback, they don't really want to say it out loud. So if you have bad feedback for anything, you could always feel free to direct message me on Slack. You don't have to say it out to everybody if you don't want to. But I'm super curious. I'm super curious on 2 things. One, what is the favorite app that people talk about? So what was the favorite app that you talked about? Dang, TikTok, really popular these days. Duolingo, Clubhouse, up and coming Clubhouse app. Snapchat. Wow, TikTok is really popular these days. I did not know that. Snapchat's still a thing. Okay, that's good to know. Social media, Spotify, Discord, Medium, Pokemon Go. Nice. One of my favorite personal apps is this app called Forest. I would describe it as a productivity app. So you basically say, hey, I want to focus for 15 minutes. And then you set 15-minute timer in the app, and then you can't touch your phone for 15 minutes. It's really great for me because usually, I'm always doing something, but I get distracted and then I go back to the app. So having this like focus app just makes me want to not touch my phone for however much time I set so that I could focus on something. The app is called Forest. So that's one of my favorite apps. What are people's least favorite apps? What are apps talked about when they talk about when you all talk about least favorite apps? GroupMe. That's funny. A year ago, GroupMe was a very popular favorite app. Okay, I'm super interested. Why do people not like GroupMe now? It was honestly a year ago, that was like people's favorite apps. Crashes a lot. Discord, Facebook is very unpopular these days, it seems. So, okay, out of all these apps that people talked about things they didn't like, what did you all get from a sense of the commonality between these apps? Like, why did people not like these apps so much? Not user friendly, privacy, not interesting to use, buggy, paywalls, ugly, difficult navigating, too complicated, too much functionality, bad UI. Okay, cool. All great things to keep in mind as you're thinking about building out your own apps. But super interesting to kind of just hear about people's like favorite apps and people's least favorite apps, right? I always find that fascinating. Okay, so kind of taking a breather. I know it takes a lot of energy to, talk to people, especially in these days when we're mostly not talking to people. So I'll just talk a bit and then we'll take a little break so we could all take a bathroom break, get some water. So just to kind of take a chill and switch to another gear. A lot of the course is going to be, we're going to have 8 weeks of classes. 4 of them are going to be coding labs where you're literally just going to listen to the instructor talk about technical topics. So we're probably going to be like, okay, this is what it means to build a screen in Android or iOS. And then you're going to get most of the class time to actually work on your flashcard app. So throughout these 4 weeks, throughout the 4 coding labs that we're going to have, you're going to be working on the same app. Every coding lab is going to build on top of the existing app so that by the end of the 8 weeks, you have a really polished flashcard app that you can even, put on the Play Store or the iOS store if you want. So coding lab is going to be a big part of this course. The second one is going to be panels. So this is always people's favorite part because we're going to bring in people from Pinterest, from big companies like Amazon and all those awesome companies. They're going to come, they're going to talk to you about their career. They're going to answer your questions you have about the tech industry, what their job is like, talk about different kinds of jobs you could get in the tech industry. You don't have to just sit in front of your computer and code 8 hours a day. Mostly everybody is doing something way different than that. So you'll be able to hear from that. And then another big part is going to be group activities. So kind of like what we just did in the breakout rooms, we're going to have more of that so you can meet other people and work on things more and collaborate more. So this is basically the 3 different kind of activities we're going to have in this class. Any questions about this? I sadly do not know anybody who works on the Forest app, but it'd be cool if I did. If you have questions that come up later, we're going to save time at the end of the class for questions as well. So don't feel like you have to come up with all your questions this specific moment. We are not going to be building out a group project per se, but in the very last week, week 8, so I'll just go on to my next slide. Sorry, I'm gonna go through this and then I'll answer the questions I see here. So going through the 8 weeks, the first week we're kind of just, talking about mobile apps. Weeks 2, 4, 5, and 7, those are the coding days. So those are the sessions that you should come ready to code. You're gonna be building out your flashcard app. You're gonna be actually coding. So those are the days you need to be high on alert. Weeks 3 and 6 are the panel weeks. So those are more chill weeks. You kind of sit back, relax, listen to people talk, ask them questions, find out more about things you're always been curious about. Week 8 is where we're going to be working in groups to kind of brainstorm app ideas and kind of come up with designs, come up with screens for app ideas of apps you would want to build. But we're not actually going to be building out the apps in week 8. But the idea is that if you're really excited, you love mobile apps, and you're really excited about this idea, and you're working with your group, then you can spend the time after this class to actually build out those apps. A lot of questions about Android Studio. I'll save that for the end because I know half the class is still doing iOS. Someone asked, are we going to be reviewing coding concepts like data structures or object-oriented programming? Not so much. I think this class is mostly going to be focused on actually iOS and Android building out. We're not going to go so much into general coding concepts, but as we're building out these Android and iOS apps, we will be talking about some of these concepts on a high level. Yeah, someone's like, if all I know is Python, is that something that I would have to be worried about? So for all the coding labs, the Android coding labs are in Java, the iOS ones are in Swift. We don't assume you're already super great at any of those languages. We assume you're good at a language like Python, for example. So even if you just know any coding language, you will be able to do just fine in the coding labs. So don't worry if you don't know Java or Swift yet. Yeah, the flashcard app you're going to build out from complete scratch. You're literally going to go into Xcode or Android Studio and start a project from scratch. And by week 7, you're going to have a very polished app. So it's going to be really cool. There's no templates. You're literally starting everything from scratch. Okay, for more general questions, I think I'm going to save more time for that for the end. The last thing I want to talk about before we take a quick break together is for communication. One, you want to make sure you're always on the course portal. So bookmark the course portal page right now because that's where you're going to get announcements. That's where you're going to find links to stuff. That's where you're going to be able to get instructions for the labs. So the course portal is going to be very important. Other than that, Slack is also going to be really important. If you have questions about anything, codepath.slack.com is where you're going to be able to ask anything. For specific Android or iOS help, you could tag those Android help or iOS help for specific questions. So if you have questions I need answering, Slack is probably the best place to go. You can feel free to direct message me anytime as well. Other than that, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, get some water, go to the bathroom if you need to, take a breather, and we'll meet back here in 5 minutes. So feel free to, check your phone, get some water. I will give a 1-minute warning before we're about to start. Flashcard app build out and you're ready to ship it to the App Store or the Xcode or the iOS store, it's going to feel awesome. So this is just a reminder before we get started that yes, things are going to be hard. There's going to be really frustrating stuff that happens. Sometimes when something doesn't happen, like the error will literally just be, hey, you probably had to restart Xcode or you probably had to restart Android Studio. And stuff like that can get really frustrating. But I'm just here to say, hey, that's just part of what happens. So just something to keep in mind as you're going through this. If you ever feel like, oh, this is too hard, I'm probably not meant for this. Everybody is meant for this. You just have to put in the work at the beginning. All right, end of cheesy section. Hopefully people find that a bit useful. But part of this, I think, is how do you set yourself up for success, right? A lot of people are like, I just got to write code. I had to put in as much time into coding as possible. I want to talk about some things that you could do to actually help yourself succeed. So first one, remember that app development is hard, right? This is not something that's going to come naturally to you. You're going to have to probably reach out for help a lot. And one of the things that I think I struggled with is not being comfortable asking for help. I don't want people to think that, hey, why doesn't Caren understand this? We already talked about this. How does she still know how to do it? Don't be afraid to reach out for help. That's the whole idea of CodePath. We have a community here to help you. So if you need something, it's definitely normal to feel like it's difficult. We're here to help you. So utilize your resources. One, a lot of people in the beginning, they're really afraid to just, Google answers. They're like, oh, I'm not a real software engineer if I'm just Googling around, right? Honestly, I'm like still Googling for like 80% of my job. If I didn't have Google, I wouldn't even know how to do my job. So when you see errors coming up and you see different things that go wrong, just Google it. Oftentimes, like the first answer on Google is going to be the thing that's going to help you solve the problem. So don't be afraid to use Google for your errors, figure out what's wrong. Google is amazing. The second thing that I think not enough people kind of know is after 30 minutes of being stuck, 30 minutes may not seem like a long time, but after 30 minutes, you could already reach out for help. Don't get stuck for too long. We're here to help you. Oh, I spelled minutes wrong. Okay, that's bothering me a bit. Anyway, so if you get stuck for more than 30 minutes, just ask for help. Go to Slack, reach out to one of us. We're gonna help you because a lot of times you just need another set of eyes on it, right? So you could either spend 5 more hours on it, or you can reach out for help and we could help you save that 5 hours. So you could actually learn more in that 5 hours. Does that make sense? Honestly, I literally copy and paste from Stack Overflow all the time. So if you do it, it's perfectly normal. Everybody does it. Don't feel bad about any of it. I am literally Googling all the time. All right. The third thing, I think the trap that a lot of people fall into is because the coding labs are built on top of each other, if you're not getting something from the first coding lab, you're going to be really, really lost by the third coding lab. So try not to fall behind on the coding labs. Every coding lab builds on top of the other. And if you're kind of just like copy and pasting a lot and you figure out, hey, I'm copy and pasting and things work, but I don't really know what's going on. That might be a sign that you need to revisit what you actually copy and paste and try to actually understand your code. Because if you don't understand what you're doing in lab 1, by the time we're on like week 6 or week 7, things are just gonna get exponentially harder, right? So try to understand as much of your code as possible. If you don't understand something, feel free to reach out. We're always on Slack. I'm on Slack. We have TAs on Slack. You have all the support you're gonna need. Make sure you don't fall behind from the first 2 weeks. Otherwise, things are gonna get really hard towards the end. The last thing to remember is everybody's going to go on their own pace, right? So you might see some people asking these really advanced questions in the chat. They're like, hey, how do I make this cool animation where this button floats all the way to the top when the user clicks on it? And you're like, I'm just trying to make the button clickable. And someone else is trying to make all these fancy animations, right? So it's easy to get overwhelmed, but try to remember that everybody is coming into this at a different pace. So some people might already be really good at Java or Swift, and some people might already have a lot of experience doing development with web. So everybody is coming into this at a different spot. You have your own goals. Don't get sidetracked. Don't get distracted by what other people are doing. All right, those are my big tips. Hopefully that helps. The biggest one is don't be afraid of Google. Don't feel like a fraud if you're Googling. I do it all the time. All right, so part of asking for help, I think, is also, hey, how do you ask good questions, right? So here are some examples of things you should do. You should say, hey, when you ask a question on Slack and you're trying to get some help, 3 things you should definitely say. Hey, what are you trying to accomplish? What have you actually tried? And what errors have you run into? So the reason I'm bringing this up is because a lot of times on Slack, when I see people ask questions, they ask really vague questions, and it takes a lot longer for us to help them resolve their questions. And it gets everybody frustrated, right? So if you can ask questions in a good way where we can help you, life will just be easier for everybody. So here's some really bad examples of questions that I've seen people ask on Slack. They just go, hey, my app is crashing. 2, nothing is happening when I click the button. 3, can somebody help me? So, all right, let's go through what's one. Why is the first question bad specifically? When I just go on Slack and I say, hey, can someone help me? My app is crashing. What specifically about that question is bad? Yeah, it's very vague, right? It's like, okay, is your app crashing because, I don't know, you didn't actually write any code? Is that why it's crashing? I have no idea what you're doing. I have no idea why your app is crashing. It's cool that you said your app is crashing and you reached out for help. But by the time a TA comes and asks you, hey, why is your app crashing? What are you trying to do? It's going to be like a couple hours of back and forth already. Versus if you ask something like, hey, I'm trying to implement the feature where the user can tap a button to change the color of the text, but nothing is changing when the button is tapped. I tried adding print statements to see if the button is tapped, and here's my code so far. If the TA sees a question like this, they could immediately dive into your problem and help you solve it, right? So there's a couple different things how this is a well-framed question. One, it says, hey, what are you actually trying to accomplish? Okay, I'm trying to accomplish a specific feature where the user can tap a button. Now the TA knows exactly what part of the code to look at, so they can help you figure out what's going wrong. And then you say, oh, okay, nothing is actually changing when the button is tapped. So now they actually know what you tried, what went wrong, and what is the actual result. All of this is clues for the TAs to help you figure something out, right? Because you have to remember the TAs are looking at a bunch of different questions, and they don't always have the best context on everybody's projects. And going into somebody else's code base and looking at somebody else's code is really difficult. So the more information you could give them, the more time it'll help them to save so that you can get your problem resolved faster. The other thing that I see a lot of people not doing is they tend to ask a lot of questions in very short time spans. So it's very clear to us that you haven't actually tried solving your own problem. People are more willing to help you when they realize how much effort you have put into the problem yourself. So the more info you can give us on, hey, what have you actually tried to actually solve this problem, the more we're actually going to be able to help you. Because once you ask a question, the TAs are going to be like, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Have you tried this? But if you immediately say, hey, I already tried these things and it didn't work, then the TA is going to be able to be like, oh, okay, this is probably what I'm wrong. And lastly, actually pointing TAs to the code, that's going to be really useful, because without the code, we really can't do much, right? We can only guess at what might be wrong. We can only guess at what you can possibly do to fix it. But without actually seeing the code, there's really not much else we could do. Any questions about this? How to ask good questions, because this is going to be key to helping unblock yourself. No questions? Sound good? Not listening anymore? Oh, these are good questions. Okay, should we upload code to GitHub before we reach out for help? Yes, that would be amazing. The best thing to do before you reach out to help is if you're like, hey, here's my code on GitHub. This is exactly where my code is. That would be great. Screenshots of your code are totally fine too. If you don't feel as comfortable uploading it to GitHub yet, you could always take screenshots of your code. That would be really helpful as well. Are you allowed to share code? You're not allowed to share code. Like, you can't have the exact same code as another student. I mean, sometimes there's only so many ways you could do something, so it might be the same exact code, but you could work together and be like, hey, how did you implement this specific feature? But don't copy and paste someone else's code. All right, if more questions come up, feel free to ask at the end. But hopefully this gives you a better sense of how to ask questions so that we could get your question resolved as quickly as possible so that you can finish your coding labs, right? Because it's going to be really frustrating. You'll be like, oh, this little thing just doesn't work, and I've spent like 5 hours on it. All right, so kind of going into this all a little bit, a big part of this course is going to be Git. I know not everybody is too familiar with Git. So maybe in the chat, you could say, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I don't know Git at all. I don't even know what Git is. 10 being I'm a master at Git. I could basically build Git from scratch. How would you rate yourself? The thing with this is people are usually conservative, right? I mean, I would probably say I'm a 5. I could push stuff. I could pull stuff. Probably can't build Git myself. The GUI is very easy. 0 is like, I have no idea what Git is. 1 is like, I've heard of Git. I don't really know what it does. Nice. Okay, so for the next 15 minutes-ish, I'm going to talk about Git for a little bit. I'm going to do a quick demo, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms and have some options on things you could do to practice Git. But if you're like, master at Git, feel free to just take a little break. Okay, so the important things about Git, actually, let me back a little bit. So Git is basically a way for us to save the progress that we made. So push the code that we write onto a place where we could see it. It's a great way to collaborate with other people also working on the same code. So you can I basically just think of it like Google Drive for code. It's just a place that holds all the projects I've built. Actually, if you had to describe Git to a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old in one sentence, how would you describe Git? Curious to see what people are saying. Describe Git to a 5-year-old in one sentence. For those people who aren't as familiar with Git. Okay, cool. A place to upload your projects, a place where we could keep our code. A time machine, I love that. A toy trunk for storing code. That's amazing. These are great. I'm gonna steal some of these for next time I do this lecture. A place where you can do projects together. Yeah, those are way better than answers than me. I should have just asked you guys instead of saying my own thing. But I think a couple things usually go wrong when people are just starting on Git. One is you want to start by always making sure you're in the right directory. And if you don't quite know what that means, that's totally fine. Where you have some different ways we could practice being comfortable working in command line and terminal to make sure you're in the right directory. Two, I think this is something that people don't do enough at all, is once you're in your coding labs, you want to run your app often and save your progress often. Like the way I code is literally I have one little thing working. I just push it. I save my products immediately and I say, okay, got this button working. Like user can now tap on button to save to see text color change or something like that. So run your app often, literally every step of the coding lab that you're going to do, every feature, run it often, save your progress often, make sure you're always in a good state. So that if something goes crazy and wrong, you could always go back. And before you start any new work, just do a pull from the repo and make sure that everything is up to date. Because merge conflict is when Git doesn't know how to resolve things that are going wrong. It's going to be really difficult to resolve. So if you're like, I have no idea what she's talking about, none of these tips even make sense to me, that's totally fine. We're going to do a little demo here. All right, so let's take a quick 2-minute break while I get things set up. And then I'm going to do a Git demo. Time for our awesome Git demo. Who's excited about Git? Nobody's excited about Git. It's okay, I'm super excited about Git. All right, so to make this kind of agnostic, because I know we have Android and iOS people, I'm gonna do stuff in IntelliJ. Do people know what IntelliJ is? Yeah, it's just a place where I do Java stuff. It's not iOS or Android specific, so hopefully this will make sense to everybody. All right, so here I've got my stuff. So basically we're just gonna try to do a couple of things here. One, I'm just gonna create a new project. I'm gonna push the project I created to Git. Let's see. All right, and then I'm gonna make a change in the project. I'm gonna add a commit message. I'm gonna push my new updated project to Git again. I'm gonna add a README file in GitHub. I'm gonna actually pull from Git, and then I'm gonna show you my favorite command, which is git reset hard. This is my, hey, I have no idea what's going on. I just want to start over again. So this is basically just what I'm going to demo real fast. If you have any other questions about Git, feel free to shout it. We can maybe go through it if we have some time. All right, so I'm just going to create this project right now. I'm just going to create Java project because I love Java. This is probably different because you're going to be doing something different for Xcode and Android. So this part isn't the important part. Git demo. But the important part is to know where your project location is, right? Because this is where you're going to be telling Git, hey, I want to push code from this location to Git. So I kind of want to just save this. Oops. I need this location because this is going to be important. All right. And then, does a little thing. I think it's creating it. Yeah, okay, we don't actually care about this, the actual project, but we're going to let it finish initializing first. All right, that was pretty quick. That's way quicker than Xcode and Android Studio. Nice. All right, so we got our project created, which is what y'all are going to be doing in the next coding lab. You're going to create the project, but now we actually want to push our project to Git, right? To make it a little more interesting, let's just add one file so we know we did something. My laptop is not cooperating. All right, what should I name my awesome Java class that we want to push to Git? Shout out suggestions. What do we want to name this Java class? We can literally name it Git pusher. Love it. All right, so I got my class. I'm just going to say an awesome class that pushes to Git. All right, the project doesn't matter. What we care about is actually creating the repo, right? So in Git, you're going to go, what I like to do is say, hey, create a new repository. It's going to give you all these options. I'm going to name the repository name. And usually when I do this, I want to name it the same exact thing as my project. Otherwise, I get really confused. So I'm going to say, actually, my project is called Git demo. My class is called Git pusher. You can add a description. So I can say like a demo for CodePath. And this is helpful because if you have a bunch of projects on Git, you're going to be like, what was this project for? If you're scared about people, actually, I think you're going to have to do public for your projects because we do check your work. So your project has to be public. I usually don't like initializing this project with anything because if I do, it's going to create weird merge conflicts when I try to push an existing project to Git. So I like to initialize it with nothing. Yeah, I don't even like adding the git ignore, which is useful, I know, but adding that can make things a little complicated. But maybe we could try adding git ignore and see what happens. Yeah, because the reason is I don't like adding these files because then it's going to be weird when I actually try to push my project. So I don't want to add git ignore. What git ignore does is it's a file that says, hey, when I have something, this kind of file change on my Mac, I don't want it to actually be pushed up to Git. And this is useful because, for example, sometimes your laptop just creates, your Mac or your Windows machine just creates these random files that literally have nothing to do with the project, but it saves certain settings and configurations about the project. And these totally do not need to be in Git. So git ignore is a good place to say, hey, these files in my project doesn't need to be pushed to Git. We really don't need to worry too much about any of this. So I'm just going to create this with literally nothing checked. All right, so now I've created this project. What I usually like to do is I know exactly where the project I created on my actual machine is, right? I still don't really know how to do this sometimes, so I do a lot of trial and error. I try to copy and paste exactly what they tell me to do. Oh, one thing before I even have to do that is in my command line, I actually have to navigate to the right place. So before I can start pushing anything, I have to be in the actual directory of where my project is located, right? And if you remember, my project was created at this desktop/git demo thing. So first I have to navigate to this place. So first I have to navigate to where my project's located. So if you don't know what I'm doing, that's totally fine. You also have an option to practice navigating around directories. But I'm basically in my terminal trying to go to the specific directory that has on my project. All right, so now I'm actually in the correct directory. This is where the project I created in IntelliJ, this is where all this lives. Now I'm there, I'm gonna literally copy and paste this and hope for the best. And then it says, I don't know what you're doing. You have nothing here. And what I do is I do git add. Git add means, hey, add all the projects or add all the files in this repository to this Git, to something that I could put into Git. Then you have to give it a commit message that says, hey, what are you actually changing? Like, what are you actually doing with all these files you're pushing? And try again. All right, so supposedly it pushed it. So I'm gonna refresh this page of where my GitHub thing is. Yay, I got my project here. And just to make sure, I wanna see at least that we have this git pusher class here. So if we go to source, yeah, we see this git pusher Java class. So that was the first step of actually pushing to Git. Any questions about this? It's okay if you're totally lost. We have guides on everything. You can watch this again. The important thing to kind of marinate in your brain right now is one, you created this project and you pushed it to Git. So you just pushed what was on your machine into Git so that GitHub, so anybody can access it. Yep, there is the awesome guide. Yeah, so these are some good questions. Are there pros and cons to pushing to main or master? No, there is literally no difference between main and master. I think, yeah, I just have a master branch now. So branching is another concept of Git. Don't have to worry too much about it at all. How often should you be pushing? That's a great question. All the time. And let me kind of demonstrate to you why. So let's see, what was the second thing we were trying to do? So we added a message. All right, so now let's add a README. So README files are what's important to kind of describe what your project is actually doing. But the other great thing about README files is if you're applying for jobs or internships, README files allow recruiters or even people who are going to interview you to get a quick look at all the projects you worked on. So README files basically say, hey, this is what the project does. This is the technologies I used to build this project. These are the different features that this project has. So I'm going to add a README file to this specific Git repo so that people know, hey, why do you have this random project called Git demo? Because that really doesn't tell anybody much, right? So I'm going to say this repo anything else I should say in my README that you think would be helpful for people who are visiting my Git profile? Yeah, what does it do? Currently nothing. Programming language used. This is all done in the markdown thing, which is why I'm using these double pound signs. That just means, hey, I'm gonna make this a little header. You could preview what it looks like this. All right, we're using Java. I think that's good enough for now. So once I've created my README in GitHub, I'm just gonna say commit new file. And what's kind of weird now is that we've done something in github.com on the web browser, but that's not synced up with what's in our actual IntelliJ, right? So we have to do a git pull to actually get that README file. Does that kind of make sense? So what's going to happen now, for example, is if I made some kind of update to this and I added a method here. So if I did some updates to my project and then I try to push it, git add says, hey, I did some changes, add all the difference between what I did the last time I committed and now. Git commit am. AM is kind of, A stands for add, so that's probably not even necessary. M is like, hey, this is the commit message. I think that's what it means. Add do nothing method. So you see now if I do a git push, it's gonna be like, hey, you weren't able to do this. The updates were rejected because what's here doesn't map what's here, right? Because what's here in our github.com thing has this README, but what's in our project, we don't have that README file anywhere, right? So now Git is like, I don't know how to resolve that conflict because it's two different things now. So what we have to do is we have to do a git pull. Git pull basically says, hey, get everything that's on github.com and sync it with my project locally. So if I do a git pull, you'll see that it doesn't work. Right, so git pull doesn't work because it's like, okay, I don't really know what git pull does, which is a bit complicated, but you could basically just say, copy and paste this thing and change this little branch parameter to master. So that basically says, hey, when I'm polling, where should I pull from? And you're like, and you tell Git, okay, you have to pull from this master branch. So now I think if we do git pull, it will work. Now it's kind of confused because it's like, okay, your local thing is different than what's on Git. So I have to do some kind of commit to say, hey, I merged the local and what's on your github.com copy, right? So that's fine. This is a weird terminal thing to get out of Vim. It's :X. I always get stuck in here, but now it's like, oh, okay, now you finally pulled what's on github.com and you added the README file, right? So now I think we could do a git push. All right, so that did work. And the way we check to see that that worked is by seeing if we have a method in git pusher. Yep, we have our do nothing git method here. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Sorry, this might seem like a lot. That's totally normal. the thing about this is sometimes you just need to see something once and be a little bit exposed to it so that when you go try it yourself or when you read the guide, things will make a lot more sense. So if you're like, I have no idea what's going on, that's totally fine. Yeah, so to avoid all those things that I just had to deal with, before you do anything locally, before you do anything, in your Android or iOS project, every time you start something, just do a git pull, just to make sure everything's up to date. And because right now, if I change this README again, for example, let me do another update in my README. Last updated February 13th. So now it's kind of out of sync again, right? What's on github.com is out of sync with what's here. So I should, before I even do anything in my code, before I do anything in here, I should do a git pull. Now my README is updated. Now I never have to worry about all those weird things that that just happened to us. Yeah, so I think if I had to map out things you should do every time, 1, do a git pull before you start anything project. 2, you should, do your thing, add code in Xcode or Ender Studio. And then 3, add the files, git add, which adds all the files that were changed. And then do a git commit. You do an M commit message. And then a git push. Yes, so this all only works if you're in the correct directory. Remember in the very beginning, we had to go to this specific directory that our project was actually in. So that's very important as well. I do think, yeah, we do have guides on how to directly do all this. If you don't want to do it with the command line, you could also do it in your coding editor. It's a little different, but the general concept is exactly the same. You need to always pull first, commit often, and then you do your push. Yeah, is there anything else that I wanted to do? My favorite thing, git reset hardhead. So this is my favorite command because sometimes I'm just doing something and things go terribly wrong and I have no idea what went wrong. I'm just like, oh God, I got to start over, right? So for example, maybe I do maybe I write this method. Now all of a sudden, nothing works. And I'm like, oh, I just want to go back to a place where my code was working. I just want to go back to a place where my code actually compiles and I can run something. That's when I do this git reset hardhead. Because when I do this, oh, it does not know how to do that. Double dashes. Git reset hardhead takes you back to the last place that the last time you committed, the last time you pushed to git. So now you notice my awesome method that was being weird, that I didn't know how to fix, is gone now. So this is my favorite message because sometimes I just want to start from something that works, right? I don't want to figure out what went wrong. I just want to start from something where I knew things were working. That's when I use git reset hardhead. Yeah, basically undoes everything. I'm like, I don't even know what I changed, right? That's going to be really complicated to figure out everything I changed and try to do everything over again. I just do, hey, just give me a clean slate so I could restart. I don't really know what the upstream means. Yeah, so git reset hardhead basically just takes you back to whatever the last thing that was committed onto GitHub was. So in this case, our last commit was to update this README. So it just takes me back to the state of my project of when I last updated my README. Any other questions about any of this? Do you recommend every time you make a commit, you also do a push? Yeah, that's a really good question. You could commit locally, which means save my progress locally. But until you do the git push, things aren't going to be on the web, actual github.com yet. I do think doing a push is useful because then at least you have a good working state on github.com, which is nice to go back to whenever you need it. If you just do it locally, maybe something goes wrong, your computer crashes or something and you can't recover it, just nice to push. Yeah, you could also do, so I was doing this through the terminal window, but you could also do all this inside Xcode or Android Studio, which would be the exact same thing. Okay, so we have about 30 minutes left in class. Let me share my screen again. So we're gonna do a 15 to 20 minute breakout room because we're gonna do a 20-minute breakout room because we don't have that much time left. But in the breakout room, there's a couple things you could do. So you could do one, start a Terminus adventure, which I gotta share my screen again. So your first option is to do a Terminus adventure, which is a really cool thing if you want to get comfortable with navigating around directories, learning how to like basically learning terminal commands. So in the side Terminus, it's basically like a game. So it teaches you how to use the terminal through a game by letting you navigate different directories and giving you quests and stuff. So Terminus is really cool if you want to get more comfortable with just using the terminal in general. If you don't want to do that, you could also push the pre-work project code that you already did to a Git repo, because I know for the pre-work project where you created the simple app that displays your name and then some buttons that changes the text color, you only had to add a GIF to your Git, right? So if you actually want to push the project code to Git, you could try doing what we just did for your actual pre-work project. That's something you could try doing if you haven't done so already. It's a good place to just practice things, make sure you're getting comfortable with Git. Or if you want to get a head start for next week when we're actually starting the coding lab, you could create a new project in Xcode or Android Studio and push all that to a Git repo so that you're just ready to go for next week. Does that kind of make sense? Terminus is just a game that you could play to get more comfortable navigating around directories and using terminal commands. So if you're already like super comfortable with the terminal, you don't have to play Terminus at all. You could try to push some project code to Git. So we're going to spend 20 minutes. You know, if everybody in your breakout room is all super good at Git already, feel free to chat, take a little break. We'll come back. If there's somebody who like needs some help with Git and you're really good at Git, this is a great time to lend your expertise and help out your classmates as well. Any other questions before we go into breakout rooms and try out some Git stuff? And again, all these instructions are also on the course portal. So in the same page where we had instructions for the last breakout session, it's the same instructions in this breakout session as well on the same page, where you could either do the Terminus adventure, push a pre-work project to Git, or start a new project and get ready for next week. Any questions before we go into breakout rooms? Otherwise, we'll see you all in 20 minutes. How's everybody feeling? Did anybody get really far into that Terminus game? What did y'all do in the breakout rooms? Anybody find any treasure in Terminus? You old man. Let's see. All right, I think we have everybody back in the breakout rooms yet. Right now. How's everybody feeling? It's like a very productive 2 hours on a Saturday morning, I know. Tired, you're excited, you're stoked for the next coding lab session. I'm kind of bored by what we did here. How's everybody feeling? Sleepy? A little tired. Yeah, so I think the main thing I want to say is Git is super hard. There's a ton you could do with Git. I'm honestly still learning Git stuff every day. The main thing you want to be able to do is just be able to push code to actually see it on github.com, be able to pull code if what's on github.com is different from what's on your directory. And we have a guide on all of this and how to do that, certain errors that you might run into as you're doing it. So don't feel too sad if you're like, oh, this is so much, it's overwhelming. It definitely is. Git is a beast. So it's totally normal to feel a little bit overwhelmed by all this. The good thing is we're not starting any coding stuff until next week. So let me just share my screen real fast. Yeah, GitHub is the only version control we have to use in this class, so we don't have to learn about anything else. All right, so, I mean, we made it to the end. Congratulations on surviving your first week. Coming up next week, hopefully everybody is really excited, is the first coding lab. So we're going to be separated next week. There's going to be an iOS class. It's going to be separate from the Android class. It's going to be two different instructors for iOS and Android. Alice and Dan. Alice is going to be leading iOS, Android. Dan is going to be leading iOS. It's going to be awesome. You're going to start building out your flashcard app, and you're going to push all that code to GitHub. If you want to be a real go-getter, there's some good things to do before the next session. One, sometimes things get weird on your computer. So if it's been a while since you touched a pre-work app, just try to run it, make sure things are still good to go. So you're ready to just hit the ground running when the coding lab starts next week. Sometimes things get a little bit messed up in your environment and some things don't work anymore. So just run your pre-work app to make sure things still working. If you're still feeling overwhelmed by Git, totally normal. Don't worry about it. Read the Git guide we linked in the course portal. Try doing some practice with Git. Try creating a new repo. Try pushing your project to your new repo. Try doing some changes. Doing some practice with Git is going to be really helpful for honestly the rest of your career. So Git is something that you're going to be using forever. So this is a great time to get started with that. If you really want to get a head start, you could create a new project in Xcode or Android Studio and push that to GitHub to really get going so that you have a fresh project ready to go come next week. But yeah, other than that, that's about it. Before we go, we have a very short survey that would be great if you could all fill out. Let me share my screen. So I just posted the link in this chat. It'll take you literally like 2 minutes. It'll help us get a better sense of what you like, what you don't like, how we can make the future sessions a little bit better. So for cohort, you're gonna choose the remote 6-week option. And then for the course, it's mobile development. And it's just some simple questions like, hey, today was, all right, today was great. How the pace was, just right, too slow. You could select all these things that you think describe you, and then leave any other comments. You could say like, Caren sucked, never let her talk to us again, or Caren was going too fast, I wish she went down slow for this specific thing. Other than that, that's about it. I'm going to stick around for as long as there are still people here asking questions. But if you filled out the survey, feel free to go. We'll see you all next week. If you have questions, feel free to ask the questions. I'll try to get through as many as I can. I'll stay around. I know I missed a lot of questions during the actual session because they were just kind of like coming in. So if I missed your question, I definitely didn't mean to ignore you. If I miss it again, feel free to message me on Slack. Yeah, otherwise, feel free to go. I know it's a little bit late for people on the East Coast already, but I'll be sticking around. Make sure you fill out the survey. I'll stick around and answer any questions you have about anything. Oh, do I? I don't know anything about hardware stuff. I just get the Mac and hope it works for the best. But yeah, I think a Mac is pretty good for coding in general. Yeah, the survey link. Let me post it real fast again. Here is the survey link. Yeah, I'm currently working at Google right now. I teach CodePath on nights and weekends. So my full-time job is actually at Google. Yeah, I'm an Android engineer at Google. So I basically write or help with the APIs that Google developers use to write their apps. It's pretty cool. Google is like, a pretty cool company with awesome perks. It's really big, so there's a lot of things going on. A lot of teams to collaborate when you want to do something. Before that, I was at some different startups. Startup world versus like big company world is totally different. We are, I've been working from home for a year now, and we are planning on maybe going back to the office this September, but we have to do rotations. So you can only go back on certain days that you're scheduled for. And you can only go into the office like 3 days a week. So we'll see where the world is in September. um, yeah. So for a lot of these like career questions and like, hey, how do I prep for a job at Google and that stuff? We'll talk a little bit in some other classes, but CodePath also has these summer interview technical prep courses. And in those courses is where we talk a lot more about, hey, this is how you prepare for a technical interview. This is what you have to do to get ready for a Google interview, for example, or maybe something less intense like Google. So we have summer interview prep courses where we really, really focus on that. I don't know. I think the general tip I have is don't get too sad when you get rejected for stuff. Don't get too sad when things don't go right, because there has been a lot of times where I've gotten rejected from offers. And what I've seen from a lot of other of my friends is sometimes getting like those rejections is really depressing, right? And sometimes you just want to kind of give up after that. But just keep going for it. Eventually you'll push through. Eventually you'll get better. If you can only get better if you keep doing it. So don't stop doing what you're doing. Don't get too dejected when things don't go your way, because tech industry is really hard to get into. It's really hard to stay in, I think. So don't get too sad when things don't go wrong. Um, how much data structures and algorithms do I use in my day-to-day job? I think I use strings arrays pretty often. Probably never use trees or linked lists. Hash maps I use a lot. Yeah, strings arrays and hash maps I use a lot. Trees and linked lists I don't use too much. Graphs I don't really use, mostly because what I'm doing is not very complicated. But for people who are working on really interesting problems, like for example, hey, how do you store like a billion different Google results, and how do you surface that to users and like really, really fast, right? If you're working on really hard problems, that's when you're actually going to need to use like trees and graphs and all that stuff. But I'm doing pretty basic stuff, so I'm not doing anything intense. I had no background in mobile development before I took my first CodePath class for Android. So I had no background before that. And then after I took my first Android CodePath class, that's when I started applying for full-time Android jobs. And I had 2 full-time Android jobs before I eventually went to Google. There's some questions about Git. I think I'm going to skip over the Git questions for now. But if you still have questions and you want to reach out to me directly, I could totally help you with Git. So if you're still feeling like really confused about something on Git, feel free to just direct message me on Slack. Yes, Google does used to give free food three times a day. Now I cook for myself. I was a CS major, but I didn't know what CS was until like the second semester of my first year in college. So I felt like I got in really behind. But I was a CS major in college, yes. I've been at Google for 2 years now. The compensation is pretty good. If you go on levels.fyi, you could get a pretty good sense of how much engineers at bigger companies make. I think for startups versus large companies question, I think startups is the kind of world where you will thrive if you're really like a super go-getter who just wants to get something done. At startups, if you have an idea and you have the motivation and the drive, you can just go and get something done, right? There's only so many people working on it. So you're not very focused on a specific thing. Versus at Google, where it's a bigger company, everybody kind of has a very special focus on their little role. So it may be a lot harder to get things moving really fast. So depending on like what kind of environment you think you're thriving, if you really need like the structure and you really need the accountability for your work, I think large companies is a good place to start at. If you just want to like, you're super driven, you're super passionate about stuff, you really have ideas and you want to be able to implement them really quickly, I think startups are a great place for that. Startups are a great place to just learn a ton, trial and error, figure out what's wrong, and go from there. Yeah, if you go, it's levels.fyi, I think. I think it's a website. Or maybe if you Google it, you can see it. I think the thing I like the most about Google is everybody who works at Google seems really, really qualified to do what they're doing. And they're also really nice people to work with. Because I think outside of just what problem you're working at and what code you're writing, a big part of the job is the kind of people you're working with, right? And the people I've worked with at Google are some of the most empathetic people, and that's probably what makes the job so easy. That everybody's willing to help out. Nobody makes you feel like you're doing something wrong all the time. Nobody makes you feel stupid for asking questions. It's a very welcoming environment, and I think that's probably one of my favorite things of working at Google. Let's see. Do I ever deal with imposter syndrome? I feel like I still deal with that every day. Like, for example, I was really nervous for doing this specific lecture. Because if you think about it, it's like, why should, like 100 people be listening to me for 2 hours, right? So I think imposter syndrome is something that nobody ever really gets over. I remember when I was going for my interviews at Google, I almost like threw up the day before because I'm like, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to be able to do all these questions that they're going to throw at me. I think imposter syndrome, the way I kind of help myself with that is I feel like everybody low key has imposter syndrome. So it's not just a you thing. Everybody is kind of feeling the same way. But the more you practice with something, the better you'll get at it and the more confident you'll get at it. And eventually you'll be like, yeah, I'm probably not the best person at it, but I'm pretty good. I'm decent. I'm not too bad. For specific things that I think helped me get the job, I studied a ton of like data structure and algorithm questions. So I used leetcode.com to study a lot of practice problems. I literally studied for like a year or two for that. I don't think the summer interview course is going to be opening applications in 2 weeks, and it's going to start in June. Summer interview prep course is a little longer, so it's 12 weeks, and it starts in June. It meets twice a week, I think, Tuesdays and Saturdays. Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely tell you when applications for that open up. Yeah, data structures and algorithms are honestly hard. Like I feel comfortable with strings and arrays, right? But trees, graphs, linked lists, those things I'm like, I think because I don't use them as often when I'm coding, I just get really intimidated by them. Depending on how you want to learn them, if you want to learn them in like an interview setting, I think going on something like leetcode.com and sorting questions by different data structures is really helpful. If you're more interested in like actually learning the data structure and algorithms, Coursera has some really good free courses that I just kind of watch the videos for. Whenever I sign up for a course on Coursera, I almost never finish it. I just kind of like cherry pick sections I'm interested in and I think would be helpful for me. Yeah, so this is like an intro to Android and iOS course. And then if you're like super interested in learning even more about Android and iOS, we have more advanced classes. So the advanced classes, super fast paced. Here we're kind of doing things slowly. We're doing like a 2 hour lab. And the advanced courses, they're doing like assignments that would take 5 to 10 hours a week, I think. So those classes are a lot more intense, but those classes really prep you for actually being an iOS or Android developer. It might be a little hard if you're doing like Android right now and you want to do iOS for the next semester, but it wouldn't be too hard. I think Android and iOS, I think in the end aren't that different. The programming language is different, but most of the like models that you need in your head to actually do program mobile apps are pretty similar. So if you really want to switch over to another platform, I don't think it would be that hard. Do we still, okay, still got 39 people here. Any other questions? Questions about stuff? Feel free to leave. I won't be offended if you leave. Or you can say hi. All right. I don't think there are any more questions. Oh, wait, we got a question. What would you say is the biggest surprise going into the tech industry? I think it's a sense that uh, I can I never really stopped learning, because I think at least when I was in college, I was like, I'm in college, and then I get my job, and then, I kind of already know what I'm going to do. So I learned everything on the job. But I think it's pretty surprising how fast tech changes. So there's like new frameworks coming out all the time. There's new ways of doing things all the time. So I feel like I'm always in this like constantly learning mode, which I think is really cool. It's cool to be able to keep things fresh. But I don't think this is something I quite expected before I started working. I thought, hey, I learned data structure and algorithms. Those never change. After that, I'm pretty much good to go. But I would say a lot of my job is still learning on the job. I feel like I'm always still learning on the job a lot. Yeah, this question about dealing with like large tech companies who do sketchy stuff. I think companies are so big that sometimes they have to make decisions that us little minions don't quite understand. So I try not to think too much about it. As long as the project I'm working on doesn't feel like a sketchy thing, like I'm not specifically writing an app to track everybody's location at all times, right? So I feel like what I'm doing is helping people in general. That makes me feel okay. If I was specifically put on a project where they're like, hey, you're going to write this secret app that tracks people all the time and send it back to our servers, I would be a little questionable. That would be questionable. But I feel like as long as what I'm doing is not making the world a worse place, I feel like generally I'm okay with that. All right, I think the questions are slowly trickling down. If you have questions, I'm always on Slack, literally on Slack 24/7. So if you have questions, you want to reach out there, feel free to DM me. Be cool to hear from more people. But yeah, otherwise I'll see you all next week.